Deconstructing Christianity and the Bible is a very real threat. It comes in the form of postmodern critical theory. We're going to talk about it. Here we go. All right, this episode is about the deconstruction of the Bible, and you may want to even say the destruction of the Bible, because that's what postmodern critical theory does to the Christian narrative in the Bible. You say, well, what do you mean the Christian narrative? Of course it's a Christian narrative. Yes, but there are new Christologies that are being put forward by mostly academics who want to appropriate the story of Christ and the entire narrative of the Bible into a different lived experience. That's what postmodern critical theory does. And if you haven't encountered this yet, you will very, very shortly, because postmodern critical theory is something that is moving at lightning speed. And it has already moved through many different industries and institutions. And one of the last safe harbors from postmodern critical theory and critical race theory and everything that sprouts out of that, queer theory and et cetera, is religion, is Christianity. It's one of the last places, but it's not safe. And critical theory is starting to move in, and once it moves in, it's over, it's done. I'm not optimistic about where things are going to go in Christianity as it is confronted with postmodern critical theory. Now, this episode is not about going into depth of what postmodern critical theory is. Suffice it to say, for now, this is a completely new worldview. Right, it is taking what is in a very Marxist-based type of philosophy, both from economy and from looking at oppressor versus victim. Right, in Marxism, primarily you're looking at the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. If we look at this very quickly, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, moving from Marxism to critical theory and the Frankfurt School in the early 20th century, what they did and decided was that Marxism was not spreading fast enough, and that looking at it purely in an economic lens was not enough to get Marxism into the West. And so the Frankfurt School, right, a bunch of Marxists came together and said, well, what we're going to do, we're going to take Marxist thought and we're going to apply it instead to the culture, to the people, to the races, to your gender identity, to your sexuality. And then we're going to split everybody up. That's what intersectionality is, right? Based on those groups that you belong to. Are you part of an oppressor group, or are you part of a victim group? And that's how critical theory works. It's all about splitting this up into different oppressor and victim groups. And the more of a victim you are, the more groups that you participate in, right? If you are black, then you're definitely in a victim group. If you are female, you're definitely in a victim group. If you are a lesbian, then you're definitely in a victim group, right? So if you are all three of those, then you are much higher up on the level of grievance, and therefore higher up on the totem pole of intersectionality. There are very few people above you in that ladder, right, of oppression. And we can all see this in the language that is now coming out of the academy, out of the universities. It has completely dominated the humanities. Every discipline of the humanities, and now just in the last few years, has started to move into math and science and business. It's going everywhere. And it is going now into Christianity. And it is going to give a very powerful frontal attack on every core principle of Christianity. They cannot coexist. It's impossible. And if you think for even a moment, well, this is about helping those that are victims and helping those that have been oppressed in the past or are part of a minority group, that is the carrot for this. But I promise you that it is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Of course you want to extend an olive branch out there. Of course you want to help those that are less fortunate. Or if you are less fortunate, of course you want to be more fortunate. That's a matter of biblical principle, right? It's what Christ taught to feed the poor and to help the refugees and those that are even the sinners, right? It's helping those that are less fortunate. But that's a matter of charity, not a matter of divisiveness, not a matter of separating everybody out into separate groups. That is a Marxist worldview. And anybody who follows the DNA, right, going back from where we are with postmodern critical theory or critical race theory or queer theory or any of these disciplines that have come out of critical theory, we'll see that they go right exactly back through postmodernism in the 70s especially, and then going back into the Frankfurt School in the earlier 20th century, and then going right back through Gramsci and then back into Marx and Engels. And none of those that push this type of theory or any discipline within this type of theory is going to push back on that, right? They accept that fully. This is all in their own words. They are going to hit democracy hard. They're going to hit capitalism hard. All of this for them is part of the Western patriarchy, right? The establishment. And they want to break it down. And Christianity is really at the core of all of that. So what happens is critical theory from the Marxist Frankfurt School comes out, and then in the 70s you get Jacques Derrida and you get Michel Foucault, and you pick up a few more principles. So here's just some real quick basic principles about postmodern critical theory. Number one, critical theory is about pulling everybody apart. It is about segregation and taking out individuality. It is, you are a part of this group and this group and this group. That is who you are. So your agency, your self, your identity is gone in that case. It is inferior to your group identity. It's a great way to come in the back door against your agency and choice. It is also the exact opposite of what Martin Luther King taught, right? Martin Luther King is a thorn in the side of critical theorists because his I Have a Dream speech, for example, is all about cohesiveness, right? It's about being judged not by the color of your skin, but being judged by your character. That is the exact opposite of postmodern critical theory. And the other points of this, there's three other points on this that I want to talk about. Number one is relative truth, right? And this is very popular in the universities today, that there is no central core truth. So when Jesus says, I am the way, right? There's one way. Well, to a critical theorist, that is not true, right? In postmodernism, that is not true. We all have our own way of getting there because we're all in different groups and have different lived experiences. So there is no universal core truth. That's one thing that's added on. Secondly, you have deconstruction. And deconstruction is basically saying we're going to pull everything apart and look at things critically, right? Following up through critical theory here, where we're going to pull everything apart. We're going to deconstruct things. Even people who are not critical theorists or postmodernists use the term deconstruct in academia. I see it all the time. It's very pervasive, this idea. And that's what's going to happen to the Bible and Christianity. It's going to be deconstructed. And the fallacy of deconstruction is that, we're going to go in and we're going to deconstruct this down, which is basically saying we're going to take the meta-narrative of Christianity and the Bible, and we're going to break it down into little pieces here. And we can look at things differently from all angles all the way around it. And basically it's like pulling down the patriarchy, right? It's pulling down the system. It's pulling down the narrative. It's pulling down the story. But inevitably what happens is that some type of order has to come out of that, right? Something has to come back out of that. Something is formed. We don't know what that something is, or what will end up coming back, or what will end up replacing possibly a Christian narrative. And I know I'm talking in almost apocalyptic terms here, but it's, and I don't mean to be a doomsdayer. I'm not a doomsdayer, but I am very concerned about where this is going. Let me give you an idea in deconstruction. Let's say that you have a chair, and you look at the chair, and you and I and everybody else, whoever watches this or listens to this episode, has an idea in their mind of what a chair is, right? But if I take deconstruction, I'm going to come down and I'm going to break it down. And I'm going to say, well, wait a minute. Is that really a chair? That's your truth. You've used that chair before, right? And what is that chair for? Oh, well, it's for sitting in. I sit in it. Oh, you sit in it. Okay, so let's look at this for a second. That's a chair to you, but to, a bird, it's a perch. To a scientist, it's the construction of the wood that's in that chair, along with the construction of the fabric and everything that's in there, the molecules, the atoms. If I start to deconstruct this, I can pull away the arms, I can pull away the legs. Now I don't have a chair anymore. What do I have? I have a pile of rubble here. Is it still a chair? Now I'm going to put the oppressor, oppressee, or victim narrative on top of that. Well, a lot of people don't have a chair. Maybe they didn't grow up with a chair in some parts of wherever. What is that to them? That's completely foreign to them. A chair is a privilege. You are privileged. Therefore, using a chair and the very idea that you see this as a chair means that you are privileged and part of an oppressor group. That is how this works. The very simplest things become something completely different. It is the newspeak of Orwellianism of 1984. And then the third thing that postmodernism brings in here is just pure power. It's all about power. It's not about truth. Remember, I've already established that there is no core truth, so I don't care about truth, right? I care about power. And if I think you have the power, I'm going to try and take that from you. I want the power. And the way I can gain the power in Christianity is to control the narrative. I'm going to change it into something else that is mine, a part of me, and not a part of you, not part of certainly a Western world. And you say, well, Greg, this isn't going to happen to the Bible and to Christianity. Come on. That's ridiculous. I mean, we're moving into the last days here, and Christianity is going to flourish and everything. Well, maybe it will. But let's take a look at what has happened to every institution where this has started to spread. First of all, the academies. That's where this is born in the United States, in the universities. All right, it is everywhere, and it started in the humanities, right? And it's just spread rapidly through the humanities. But then it's gone in through the administration in each of the universities as well, so that now it is starting to spread throughout the university, going into things where you have more of an objective truth, right? Like science and math, and it's moving into those areas. And it's actually taken away. That's why you have a big discussion sometimes online that you might see of the idea of 2 + 2 = 4. Right? It's taken right out of George Orwell. And you'll have a lot of people come back and say, no, it's not. So then it's moved out of the universities. It's gone into Hollywood. It's moved and dominated there. The narrative that we have there is now moving very, very much into identitarian types of movies and projects. The news media is completely enthralled with identity politics. Our public schools, right? There are 1,600 public school systems that have adopted to one degree or another postmodern critical theory. So our children are being brought up with this now. From the youngest of ages, and even before then, there's books out there that are, about for babies, right? To teach toddlers about identity politics. Of course, big corporate America has adopted this hook, line, and sinker as well. And then it's seeping into our federal government, our state governments, our local governments as well. So every institution that this has moved into like a virus, it has overtaken or is overtaking. And the momentum on this thing is why I'm so concerned about Christianity and the scriptures. I'm a patient at a very large medical group, right? Very, very, one of the nation's largest medical groups. And you know what I get almost on a weekly basis is a newsletter telling me about identity politics, sometimes related to medicine in some way, but sometimes not. It's just a matter of a message of goodwill. Now, why a doctor is telling me about identity politics or a medical group is telling me about identity politics without relating to my health whatsoever, I have no idea. But there it is, and it's moving very quickly into medicine and psychology. So when you take all of this together, it confronts Christianity first and foremost with the idea of who you are, right? You are part of a group, and therefore there is a conflict, a direct conflict with you having a self, having an agency, an independence of your choice. Wherever you are in that grievance ladder, right? That's who you are, and you should act accordingly. Instead of, we are all created in the image of God, all created in the image of God. So it takes an identity, a universal identity of being children of God, and it says, no, I'm going to split you up. I'm going to pull you apart, and in the name of goodness, I'm going to turn you all against each other. So postmodern critical theory states that you do not have an authentic self. What's odd is we're getting to the point where you see discussions of Christian leaders with atheist leaders, if we want to call them that, a Sam Harris or a Bill Maher, that are actually joined together. That's how this is completely changing and realigning demographics. This is a very powerful, powerful ideology. As an example of this moving into Christianity, many of you probably know that the Southern Baptist Convention back in 2019 adopted the infamous Resolution Number 9. What this basically said was, even though it said it didn't open up completely the idea of bringing critical race theory into the interpretation of Scripture, it fully opened the door for it as a legitimate way to interpret Scripture, right? Again, this is antithetical to Christianity, completely antithetical to Christianity. And now the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest Christian denomination in the country, largest Protestant Christian denomination in the country, you can see the president of the Southern Baptist Convention very much squirming around right now on how I'm going to handle all this. It's really a difficult position to be in. But that's just an example of how this is starting to move in. And a number of churches have adopted this and are teaching it to their congregations. Now, let me give you a few examples of how very influential people in academics especially have started to move into biblical studies, right? That's where this is going to all start coming from, is biblical studies. As people go through, they get their titles, they're going to start writing books, they write papers, they move into positions of authority within a church, they preach, they become pastors, etc., right? And they've been brought into this world of identity politics, this world of postmodern critical theory. So here's a couple of examples of what we're already getting here and what this does to the Bible, how it deconstructs it, how it appropriates the story of Christ even. Judith McKinley herself defines her methodology as, quote, reading with a gender lens, or through the lens of post-colonialism. So again, it's adopting the story of the Bible, the characters of the Bible, the narrative of the Bible, and talking about it in a sense of identity politics. Let's continue here and get a little better idea of what that means. Here's one writer writing about what womanist Christology is. Now, again, Christology is the idea of who Christ is and what his story is. And if you look carefully and you're looking through the readings, what you're finding is that the term Christianity is only used in a pejorative sense. But Christology, being that it is an academic pursuit, not a religious pursuit, right, is lifted up. And Christology then becomes this ability to create a malleable narrative, right? Something that you can form to adapt to your own personal lived experience, right? That's part of postmodernism is part of that lived experience. I want the Bible to mirror me and my wants and my needs and my way of thinking. So Christology is used all the time. You're going to see this more and more from the universities. The term Christianity not used very often, and mostly as a pejorative in a negative sense, and Christology lifted up as the pursuit of what Christ means. Because then you can take that and make it whatever you want. So this author says this: some approach the Bible objectively to critically evaluate text that degrades women and people of color and to offer an African-centered form to resist male domination and bias. Can you see how you start to read that into the Bible everywhere? Or what could be termed anti-women or androcentric attitudes and forms. This is all about the Bible. Others draw on resources outside the Bible to enhance the plurality and cohesion of the texts, along with our life experiences, and reject Scripture as a whole or part which is seen to serve male interest only. These methods are not separated and can be endorsed together, right? So again, this is all about us versus them. So when you hear about this and you think it's some kind of a let's work together kind of a thing and build something cohesive, a Zion-like attitude, it is false. That is not true. It is us versus them. It is my group wants to appropriate the Bible. Your group wants to appropriate the Bible. All these groups want to appropriate what the Bible is and make it theirs with their lived experience because there's no core truth to it. This is the danger of this philosophy, of this worldview. I want a woman, a man, someone who is of African descent, someone who is Asian, everybody should be able to relate to the Bible as best as they can. That is not the issue. It's how you're going to change everything in creating an identity of Christ and a meta-narrative of the Bible that is not true. And they fully agree that it's not true. They don't care if it's true. They'll say they don't care it's true. So this is from a Kelsey Waters of St. John's University. She writes a paper called Solidarity and Suffering, Liberation Christology from Black and Womanist Perspectives. Okay, again, the term Christology is used. It's not about Christianity. It's the study of Christ. Here's what she says. The God whom we know and love is actively, sacramentally, eternally present in the world. Okay? Perhaps the most fundamental theological task of Christians is to find the God who is simultaneously immanent within us, so far so good, and infinite in the finite reality of human history and culture. That sounds pretty good, right? There's the carrot. Where's the stick? There it comes. This is the essence of not Christianity, right? This is the essence of Christology. For the greatest manifestation of God's activity in and through our lived experience is God becoming incarnate in the person of Jesus Christ. It follows then that the goal of Christology is to examine the person, presence, participation, and purpose of Christ. There are several cultural lenses and theological perspectives which have contributed to the Christological quest to know Jesus. The important thing to understand here Now, I'm not saying that everybody is going to come to Christ the same way. Christ is the way, and there is only one way with him. But we might end up to him, getting to him, and understanding him in different ways. That's completely understandable. We all think differently and have different backgrounds. That part is fine. But changing who Christ is, and changing here, again, you see Christological Quest here. This is not a quest to be a better Christian. This is not a quest to be more like Christ and follow his example and his teachings. This Christology here is used specifically as a new narrative. That's what it is. A new narrative of the Bible. Here's an example of, I'm just pulling a small description here of a course that is offered for biblical studies. Here's what it says in the last line. The course invites students to construct Christologies that draw upon Black liberationist and womanist theological traditions. Again, I want women to relate to Christ. I want those that are Black to relate to Christ. I want everybody to relate to Christ. But constructing your own Christology is not the way to do this. That is trying to change the Bible. And they do. When you follow this, you'll see that they do, all the way to the definition of who Christ is. Here's Hugh William Montefiore. I don't know if I've got that name right, but Hugh William Montefiore states this: only in the longing for a world of economic, right? See where you're starting to get the Marxism in here. A world of economic and sexual justice together and not subordinated to one another can the encounter with the divine take place, which is absolutely false. That's usually how an encounter with divine does take place. But this is an encounter to be found at the crossroads of desire when one dares to leave the ideological order, the common narrative, of the heterosexual pervasive normative. You need a degree to understand just what those three words are. This is an encounter with indecency and with the indecency of God and Christianity. They're saying that Christianity is indecent as a whole. Now, Marcelle Altahouse Reed is interesting as well. And here's what she offers for biblical studies and her Christology. A biographer writes of her, she speaks about the bisexuality of Christ as an inclusive understanding of the incarnation. Again, it's how do I want to create my own Christology here and make it appropriate for me? She wants to argue for a larger Christology, which recasts Jesus in postmodern sexualities, genders, and economic locations. See, again, these writers are all blatant about what they want. These people that are moving this into Christianity are not hiding anything. It's the people that accept it and then turn around and tell you about it who are hiding it. Right? It's not the people that are coming up with it and pushing it. The movers and shakers are not shy at all about what they're trying to do. But what we want to see is that these are all different lenses that are being created to form a different narrative of what the Bible is. And then Altahouse Reed gives us this zinger. And this is not surprising at all once you read these things. The virginity of the Virgin Mary needs to be indecented. What is that? It means she wants to take away the decency of the Virgin Mary. Why? Why would she want that? Well, because it hides the lives of many poor women who she describes as rarely being virgins. Right? Now, what is she doing here with the Virgin Mary? She's appropriating it. She doesn't want to tell the story of Mary being a virgin. She thinks it's bad. See, it's not the truth that matters. It's taking the narrative of the Bible and adopting it into a group so that it fits their lives. So instead of us trying to make decisions as individuals and reaching Christ, we change Christ and change the Bible to be who we are. And this is my point in conclusion here, right? It is that this worldview and ideology is extremely dangerous, and I am not very optimistic about our ability to fight it off. When you are accepting postmodern critical theory into your church, into your study of the Bible, these examples are exactly what you're bringing in. It's no longer Christianity. It's a Christology, of which there are many you can choose from. It's an academic, lived experience Christology, where each identity group in the intersectionality ladder will battle for their group's interpretation of the Bible and meta-narrative of the Bible and the story of Christ to be the one that takes over the entire narrative of the Bible. I think it would be wise of us to read Paul in his letter to the Romans. In chapter 16, verse 17-18, it says the following. And this is the King James Version. Now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and avoid them. For they that are such serve not our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by good words and fair speeches deceive the hearts of the simple. I hope that we can reach out to others, people that are of otherness, with charity and with love, and that we can bring people together and not think that we each have to have our own meta-narrative, where we have to break apart and segregate and appropriate a Christology for our own group. I'll talk to you next time.